let's continue with the sentences with reduced clauses. Sometimes it is possible in English to reduce the clauses, okay? This can contribute to the sentence variety. So we do this, we can just reduce the clauses, but there are some conditions that we can do this. Well, thank you so much, Pegah. Let me ask someone else to join us. آقای اسدی، وحید اسدی is not ready. خانم مرزیه رضایی.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, Marzieh. Marzieh, will you please start? Wahid, I will come back to you again. Marzieh,
Yes.
go on, please.
Sentences with reduced clauses. It is possible in English for a clause to appear in a complete form or in a reduced form. My friend should be on the train which is arriving at the station now.
What kind of
First
clause
one is adjective
it
clause.
is? Okay, it is adjectival clause because we see the relative clause connector and it is at the same time the subject and it modifies a noun. So it's an adjectival clause connector. In adjectival clause connectors, we can reduce them when the connector functions as the subject at the same time. And as you see, immediately after that, we don't have any subject. So we do away with the connector which functions as the subject. And if there is a be verb, we just do away with the verb be. So what is remaining is a phrase. Adjectival phrase, arriving at the station now. You remember we talked about the participles. Present participle functions as an adjective and it's a post modifier. It modifies the noun train. So here we can reduce it. If you look at the next one, we have although. Go on, please.
Although it was not really difficult, the exam took a lot of time.
Well, what kind of clause it is?
It's adverb clause.
Very good. Adverbial clause, and this is a subordinate clause connector, although which shows the contrast. And we have the subject and the verb. When the subject of the adverbial clause is the same as the subject of the main clause, although it was not really difficult, the exam took a lot of time. So as you see, the pronoun comes before the noun is the same as it. So in that case, we are allowed to reduce this it and the be verb at the same time. So we will have, although not really difficult, comma, the exam took a lot of time. Well, go on, please.
The first sentence shows an adjective clause in its complete form, which is arriving at the station now, and in its reduced form, arriving at the station now. The second sentence shows an adverb clause in its complete form, although it was not really difficult, and its reduced form, although not really difficult.
Very good. Go on.
The two types of clauses that can reduce in English are one, adjective clauses, and two, adverb clauses. It is important to become familiar with these reduced clauses because they appear frequently on the TOEFL test.
They appear frequently on a TOEFL test. They appear frequently on the writings of the scholars. So it is very important to know how to reduce them. Use reduce adjectival clauses correctly. Go on, please.
Adjective clauses can appear in a reduced form. In the reduced form, the adjective clause connector and the be verb that directly follow it are omitted.
Connector
The
and the be verb that directly follow it. Directly follow it. It means there is no subject immediately after this connector. The woman who is. So I have the connector, and at the same time, I don't see any subject, so this connector can function as the subject of the sentence. So in that case, I can do away with the connector which functions as the subject and a be verb at the same time. So I will come up with the woman waving to us is the tour guide. So waving, you remember verbals. We talked about verbal phrases. A clause is a group of logically related words and they contain subject and a verb and they cannot stand alone as a complete thought. But a phrase is a group of logically connected words and they lack either subject or verb or both of them. So here we see the subject and verb are missing. So we have a phrase, and the phrase were prepositional phrases, and they could function either as an adjective or an adverb or verbal phrases. Verbal phrases have the verb form, but they are not verb. This is not a verb. It has a verb form, and the verbal phrases can be either infinitive or participial or gerund. In a participial phrase or verbal phrase, we can have either present participle or past participle. And present participle and past participles are always adjectives and they post modify the noun. So this is correct. The same is true with letter. You know who, which, and that. These are relative clause connectors. Relative clause connectors or adjectival clause connectors. These are relative pronoun. You remember last session we talked about adjectival clauses which were actually made by relative adverbs. So here, these are pronouns. Pro means instead of noun, but relative adverb requires a noun immediately after that. So after when, after why, after where, when, where, why, these can function as adjectival clause marker, but immediately after them we expect to see the subject. Okay? If there is a subject immediately after the connector, you cannot reduce it. Here there is no subject, and that is why we are reducing the connector which functions as a subject and the be verb at the same time. The remaining is what? The remaining is an adjectival phrase. The picture on the table is full of iced tea. On is a preposition. There is a non-marker table is the object of the preposition. Preposition plus the object of the preposition. It is either an adverb or an adjective, but it is an adjective here. And it post modifies the Peter. It's an adjective because it is the reduced form of an adjectival clause that is on the table. And it tells what kind or which feature, okay? The which feature, the one on the table. So this is an adjectival clause. Or written last week. Here, as you see, written is the past participle. Again, it is a post modifier and it is an adjectival phrase. Go on, please.
Each of these sentences may be used in the complete form or in the reduced form. In reduced form, the connector who, which, or that is omitted along with the be verb is or was. If there's no be verb in the adjective clause, it is possible to have a reduced form. When
It
there's
is
no be verb,
possible. Thank you so much. There is a condition. If clause. There is a condition if there is no be verb. But I have the same connectors which function as the subject. Again, the subject is not present. These connectors are there and they can function as the subject at the same time. Are we allowed to reduce it? Yes. Regardless of tense, change the verb to the present participle. So you reduce the connector which functions as the subject. It means there is no subject immediately after that. I don't see any subject here. So this connector function as a subject, and there is no be verb. No problem. I just change the verb regardless of the tense, whether it is past or present or future, to the ing form or present participle, which becomes appearing in today's paper. Go on.
When there is no be verb in the adjective clause, the connector is omitted and the verb is changed into the ing form. I don't understand the article which appears in the today's paper.
Or appears in today's.
Or yes.
When we have which appears, the sentence is a complex sentence by structure. I have the main clause, one main idea, and one dependent clause, which is embedded or subordinate clause. When we reduce it, we will have a simple sentence because we have one subject and one verb. Appearing is not a verb. Appearing is a verbal, so we cannot take it as a verb. So the sentence is a simple when you reduce it. I don't understand. I have my subject, my verb, my first complement, then appearing in today's paper is the second complement. Or appearing post modifies the article, so it is a part of the first clause, and in today's paper is the second complement. Let's go to the next one. Go on, please.
It should be noted that not all adjective clauses can appear in a reduced form.
This
An
is
adjective
very
clause can appear in
important. This is an exception to the rule. Not all adjectival clauses can appear in a reduced form. Go on. Go on, please.
An adjective clause can appear in a reduced form only if the adjective clause connector is followed directly by a verb. In other words, an adjective clause can only be reduced if the connector is also subject.
Is also subject. This is the condition. The connector and the subject are the same. As you see, the woman that I just met, here I have the subject, so I cannot reduce it. If you reduce, this is wrong. If I say the woman that just met, this is wrong. Okay? This is not possible. The woman that I just met, or if I say the woman that, so I cannot reduce, so no way. Let's go to the next part.
A final point to note is that some adjective clauses are set off from the rest of the sentence with commas, and these adjective clauses can also be reduced. In addition, when an adjective clause is set off with commas, the reduced adjective clause can appear at the front of the sentence.
Very good. Remember, sorry. Remember, in a sentence, we should not set off the subject of the sentence White House as the subject from its verb with a comma. But we are allowed to use two commas, and as you see here, we have two commas to set off this embedded element, this intervening element, which functions as an adjective. How did I know that this is an adjective? I know that which is a connector, relative pronoun, and it refers to non-animate nouns. So, and there is no subject, so I am allowed to reduce this as an adjectival clause. I do away with this and a be verb at the same time. So the White House, comma, which is located in Washington, D.C. becomes the White House, comma, located in Washington, D.C. is the home of the president. This is the reduced form. And this is non-essential. Non-essential adjectival clauses come within 2 commas because any intervening elements which is non-essential comes between 2 commas because we know that the White House is the home of the President of the United States. We know that the White House is located in Washington, D.C. is the home of the president. So located in Washington, D.C. is not necessary. That is why it is between 2 commas. It is non-restrictive. The meaning is extra. We have idea about this. So it is non-essential or non-restrictive. When you reduce an adjectival clause and you come up with an adjectival phrase, this is called modifying phrase. A modifying phrase can move to initial position in a sentence. And we do this in order to, first of all, have a very advanced type of writing in our sentence to show the sentence writing in our writings. And this shows the focus of the sentence. When an adjectival clause, which is reduced to an adjectival phrase, moves to initial position, this is to show the focus. Located in Washington, D.C., comma, the White House is the home of president. And this part is called modifying phrase. This structure is correct when the subject of the main clause can function as the subject for the modifying phrase. Or the modifying phrase should modify the subject of the main clause. So, the White House is located in Washington. It makes sense. The White House is the home of the president. It makes sense. So, the subject can function as the subject for the modifying phrase. So, this structure is correct. But if we say the White House, I don't know, for example, the White House cat is located in the Washington, D.C. I don't know whatsoever. So if you just use a noun as the subject and it cannot function as the subject for the modifying phrase, we will have dangling constructions. Dangling. And this is, I do apologize, it's very hard to write. Dangling. Okay. Dangling constructions. ساختارهای آویزان. یعنی در جمله مهمترین عنصرامون فعل و فاعلمونه. وقتی که فاعلی برای یک عبارتی وجود نداره باید براش این قسمت فاعلیت بکنه. White House باید بتونه براش فاعلیت بکنه. اگه نتونست این کار رو بکنه اون موقع در اصل میشه dangling construction و متاسفانه در رایتینگ های بسیاری از حتی کسانی که توی ژورنال ها مقالاتشون رو ارسال میکنن میبینیم که ساختارهای dangling بسیار دیده میشه. ببینید the president who is now preparing to give a speech is meeting with his advisor. باز هم جمله واره‌ای که ما داریم توصیفی و غیر ضروریه، چون غیر ضروریه داخل دوتا کاما اومده. هر چیزی که غیر ضروریه داخل دوتا کاما بیاد. یادمون باشه نمیتونه با یک کاما فاعل رو از فعلش جدا کرد. The president is meeting with his advisors is the main clause. And as you see, the adjectival clause is embedded into the main clause. And it sets off the subject from its verb. So it's intervening element. And as you see, there are two commas, and this adjectival clause is offsetting this subject from the verb. So, because the connector functions as a subject, we can reduce it with the verb. So the remaining is phrase, modifying phrase. It is an adjective. You remember, we never ever start a sentence with an adjectival phrase unless we have the subject of the main clause and this single comma to show that the subject also functions as a subject for this part. The president is now preparing to give a speech. The president is meeting with his advisor. It makes sense. If I write the president's hat, the president's apostrophe S hat or cat or whatsoever. So the hat is the subject. Cat is the subject. Hat is not preparing to give a speech. Hat cannot give a speech. So it doesn't make sense. So the sentence is dangling. همیشه تو کنکور کارشناسی ارشد یه دونه یا دو تا از این نوع ساختارها به ما میده. شما اگر جمله رو نگاه کردین که یک کاما دیدین بعدش فعل فاعل دیدین بلافاصله بعد از کاما کوردینیت کانجانکشنی هم نداشتین قبلش هم سابوردینیت کلاس کانکتورها رو ندیدین ولی یا present participle یا past participle رو دیدین حتما این modifying phrase نقش صفت رو داشتش یعنی همون صفتی که اینجا بود ادوانس کرد اومد تو initial position و اینجا این صفت باید این فاعل رو توصیف بتونه بکنه یعنی president now preparing to give یا اینکه این فاعل بتونه برای این صفت فاعلیت بکنه اون موقع جمله ساختارش درسته در غیر این صورت حتی در این قالب وقتی که فاعله نتونه فاعلیتش رو نشون بده میشه dangling construction و یکی از major error های گرامره One of the major errors of the grammar is dangling construction. If the subject, which comes immediately after the comma, and this follows a modifying phrase. So if the subject cannot function as the subject for this modifying phrase, or the modifying phrase cannot modify the subject, in that case the sentence is wrong and we call it dangling construction and it is one of the major errors of grammar. And as you see, we have the reduced clause in non-essential adjectival clauses. we can reduce the non-essential adjectival clauses, and after the reduction we can move it to initial position. So these are the sentence varieties. وقتی که جمله می نویسی یک بار که به این شکل نوشتی، یک بار هم در پاراگراف بعد ریدیوسش کن، یک بار هم در پاراگراف بعد مووش کن به اینیشال پوزیشن. نشون بده که گرامرت رو بلدی، نشون بده که گرامرت رو مستر کردی تو رایتینگ. وقتی که رایتینگ های آیلتس و تافل رو دارن نمره میدن یا اکادمیک اسای رایتینگ ها رو نگاه میکنن، دیگه کاری به گرامر، چون آیلتس و تافل دیگه گرامر رو به صورت دیسکریت آیتم جداگانه اسس نمیکنه، گرامر شما رو در درون رایتینگ شما میسنجه. وقتی که شما میتونین این کارها رو بکنین، اون موقع که این آدم زبانش رو، گرامرش رو مستر کرده، در سطح ادوانس قرار داره. پس در ساختارها سعی بکنین کانشسلی همه اینها رو ایمپلمنت بکنین. یادمون باشه این نکته بسیار مهم. Very important note. The word that as an adjectival clause connector cannot introduce a non-essential adjectival clause. It means that instead of which, if I use that here, and there are two commas, the sentence is wrong because that never introduces a non-essential adjectival clause. This is non-essential, non-restrictive, non-necessary. This is extra information. We know that. So a relative clause that cannot start non-essential adjectival clause. سوالم اومده بود. that رو با کاما آورده بود و غلط بود. شما همین جمله رو توی مایکروسافت آفیس تایپش بکن، that رو بذار اونجا، میبینی که زیرش خط میکشه، میگه که correctش بکن. Okay, let's move. Well, thank you so much. Let me ask خانم جعفری فاطمه, then سپر, then محمد متین, then we will have other students. خانم مرزیه, will you please read this part?
Yes, different television programs, the witness gave counsel what had happened. I
Marzieh,
think
do you see any
C is the
comma?
mistake.
Is there any
Yes,
comma? Yes, there is a comma. Do you see any coordinate conjunctions such as and, for, yet, so?
no,
No. So
no,
here you have the subject and verb. This is your main clause. So let's look at this part. It should be either an appositive, or it should be a prepositional phrase, or it should be a subordinate clause, adverbial clause, or it should be a modifying phrase, reduced adjectival clause. یکی از این قالب ها میشه. یا بدله. اگه بدل باشه verb form نداره، همه اینها شکل فعلی دارن، بس بدل نیست. prepositional phrase یعنی با حرف اضافه شروع شده، اصلا حرف اضافه ای نیست. یا modifying phrase، یا اینکه جمله واره قیدی adverbial clause connector adverbial میخواد، نیست. پس حتما باید عبارت باشه. عبارت هایی که modifyingن یا present participle یا past participle. تنها گزینه که اینجا سینه. اگر A رو انتخاب بکنم چی میشه؟ I will have the subject and verb. دوتا main clause با یک کاما به هم وصل شده، میشه comma splice، جمله run on sentence. If I choose this, who appeared on several, okay, who is a connector, adjectival clause connector. جمله واره توصیفی اول جمله هیچ وقت نمیتونه بیاد. جمله‌م هم که آخرش سوالی نیست که بگم جمله‌مو سوالی داره میکنه. پس این هم غلطه. جمله واره توصیفی اولش نمیاد، چون جمله واره های توصیفی که فاعل و فعل دارن یا اینکه کانکت خودش در نقش فاعله بلا فاصله بعد از اسم میاد. اینجا اول جمله اومده. ولی reduce adjectival clause میشه modifying phrase. modifying phrase یا adjectival phrase میتونه اول بیاد. اون موقع حتما یا ing یا ed یا past participle هست یا present participle هست. اینم که خودش فعل، اصلا جمله به این شکل شروع نمیشه. Okay, let's say how we can reduce adjectival clauses. Go on, please. Marcia.
The following chart lists the structures of reduced adjective clauses and rules for how and when reduced forms can be used. Reduce adjective clauses with the be verb in the adjective clause, adjective connector subject who, which, that, be, with no be verb in the adjective clause connector subject who, which, that, verb plus ing. To reduce an adjective clause, omit the adjective clause connector subject and the be verb. If there is no be verb, omit the connector subject and change the main verb to the ing form.
Regardless of
Only
tense.
reduce
به
an adjective
زمانش نگاه نکن. گذشته هم باشه ing دار بنویس. آینده هم باشه ing دار بنویس. Go on.
Only reduce an adjective clause if the connector subject is directly followed by the verb. If an adjective clause is set off with commas, the reduced clause can be moved to the front of the sentence.
Very good. First of all, we reduce it, then we move it to initial position. Because the adjectival clause cannot initiate the sentence. وقتی که شما داری کوتاهش میکنی جمله رو. Let's get back to the previous slides. وقتی که داری جمله رو کوتاه میکنی میشه این. از این دوتا کاما میگیریم میاریم اول جمله. اینجا باید یه کاما باشه. بس از دوتا گوش این کاما میگیریم اینو با این رو میگیریم میاریمش اول جمله. ولی هیچ جمله با کاما شروع نمیشه. No sentence starts with a comma, and that is why we do away with the first comma. But this is the second comma. The same is true when the adjectival clause ends the sentence. So when it is non-essential adjectival clause, it comes between two commas. So no sentence ends with a comma. So we drop the second or omit the second comma. اگر آخر جمله باشه، مثلا اینجا is the home of the president that is، that که نمیتونه باشه به خاطر اینکه میخوایم نان اسنشال بیاریم و با کاما. who is incumbent. So who is incumbent یعنی الان هم در مسند کارش هست. اون موقع جمله که تمام میشه دیگه کامای دوم رو نمیذاریم و اون کامای حذف میشه. خب let's go to this part. Exercise 13. Let me ask Seper, then Fatima Jafari. Seper, go on with number 13. Number 3.
Hello, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. Number 3.
Number 3. Thank you. Sir, the term of 4 years, the mayor of the town will face re-election next year. It's correct, I suppose.
Very good. Look, we have a comma. There is no coordinate conjunction immediately after that. Before that, I see the modifying phrase. It starts with a participial phrase. So the subject of this sentence should function as the subject for this part. So the mayor serves a term of 4 years. The mayor of the town will face the re-election next year. So this shows the sentence is correct. But if I have the mayor's car, so the car will be the subject. The car serving a term of 4 years. No, this is not correct. Mayor's cat. Again, it's not correct. Mayor's hat. It's not correct. So the subject should function as a subject for this part. So in this type of sentences, we see the comma. This comma is a must, and immediately after the comma, we have the subject and verb. And this subject can function as the subject for the modifying phrase, or the modifying phrase modifies the subject. In that case, the sentence is correct. Otherwise, it is called dangling construction. Thank you. Next one, please. Go on. Number 4.
The brand new Cadillac purchasing less than 2 weeks ago was destroyed in the accident. I think it's also correct.
Not purchasing. Purchasing less than 2 weeks ago.
That's right,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
so purchasing less than 2 weeks ago. This is a modifying phrase. It comes in between two commas. Okay, so it is a reduced adjectival clause. Purchasing, it means that the car is purchasing itself. Does it make sense? Or it is purchased. When you are reducing, you have be verb is purchased. Is purchased. So which is purchased? The brand new Cadillac, which is purchased. So we drop which and is at the same time, so we will have purchased rather than purchasing. Okay? If we have purchasing, immediately after this, we need to see a noun. And this is direct object. What? I don't see any noun here. That is why it should be in the passive form, purchased. So the past participle. Incorrect. Number 5. Go on, please.
The fans who supporting their team always come out
Come out
to the games in large numbers. It's wrong.
Okay. So is it correct?
It's wrong. No,
What's wrong?
not correct.
What is wrong?
Well,
We have the connector, and this connector requires a verb. Supporting is verbal, it's not a verb. That is why the sentence is wrong. If you want to correct it, either you drop the connector or you change the verbal into the verb. So incorrect. Go on. Next one, number 6.
The suspect can be seen in the photographs were just released by the police.
Okay. Is it correct?
I think it's wrong.
Very good.
I think
What's
it's
wrong? The suspect is the subject. Can be seen as the first verb. Were released. Second verb. I have 2 verbs and no connector. That is why it is wrong. If you want to correct it, you need to add a connector here, or you can drop the be verb. Okay, next one, number 7.
The food placing on the picnic table attracted a large number of flies. It's correct, I guess.
The food placing. Can food place itself on picnic table? Or the food placed? Which one? When you use placing, immediately after that,
That's right.
you need to have a noun as an object. I don't see a noun. The food placing, there is no noun. So it may.
Actually, the food placed.
Very good.
That's right.
The food placed on the picnic. Number 8, go on.
Impressed with everything she had heard about the course, Mary signed her children up for it.
Okay, so correct or incorrect? I have a comma. Immediately after the comma, I see the subject and verb. Before this, I have participial phrase. So I should see whether it is dangling or it is correct. Mary impressed with everything. Mary signed her children up for it. So it makes sense. So it is correct. Very good. Next one.
The passengers in the airport waiting room heard the announcement of canceled flight round audibly.
Okay, number 9. Is it correct? Do you see a comma? Yeah, you see 2 commas. One is here, the other one is here. Intervening element. The passengers, subject. In the airport waiting room, prepositional phrase, extra information. The passengers groaned audibly. Subject verb. This is main clause. So, heard the announcement of the cancelled flight. This is non-essential reduced adjectival clause. But what is wrong? Heard or hearing?
Actually, there mustn't be a comma uh, between the verb, between the subject and the verb. So it's
If it is non-essential, you can have these 2 commas. Okay? So, look, if it is heard, immediately after the heard, you cannot have a noun. Announcement is a noun. Okay? If we take heard, we cannot have the noun. So this is wrong. We have to change heard to hearing so we can have the noun. Hearing the announcement of the cancelled flight. So the passengers hearing the announcement of the cancelled flight. So in that case, it is correct. Now it is incorrect. We change heard to hearing. Number 10.
dissatisfied with the service at the restaurant. The meal really was not enjoyable.
What
I
is
think it's incorrect.
what is wrong? Look,
Well,
we have the
the
comma.
subject is the meal,
Uh-huh. Immediately after the
but
comma,
the
I see
meal
the subject and a
obviously
verb.
cannot be dissatisfied, so it doesn't match with the verb.
Very good. The meal dissatisfied. Meal cannot be dissatisfied. This is dangling construction. This is illogical reduction. نمیتونیم این رو کوتاه بکنیم به خاطر اینکه اشتباه بوده. میل که فاعل جملمه، من توی مقالات تسا بسیار دیدم که اینطوری می نویسن و اشتباه داره ریدیوس میکنه adjectival clause رو. modifying phrase رو میاره اول ولی فاعل رو اون modifying phrase نمیتونه modify بکنه. اون فاعل باید بتونه برای این قسمت فعالیت بکنه. meal dissatisfied می غذا ناراحت میشه. بنابراین جمله dangling modifier آویزونه، فاعلی نداره. در مورد پانکچویت کردن جملات توصیفی صحبت کردیم. گفتیم که اگر نان اسنشل باشه باید داخل 2 تا کاما بیاد. این broccoli which people often leave uneaten is very nutritious. The vegetables that people leave uneaten are often most nutritious. 2 تا جمله درسته ولی چرا that اینجا و which اینجا؟ چون اگر اینجا which بذارم و ریدیوسش بکنم non essential میشه و اون موقع هیچ اطلاعی در مورد انواع وجیتبل ها ما نداریم. کدوم وجیتبل منظورتون بود؟ وقتی که اون رو specifyش میکنیم میاییم به براکلی میرسیم. broccoli is very nutritious. گفتن اینو همه میدونن، بس من این گفتن اینی که براکلی رو خیلی ها نمیخورنش ضرورتی نداشت، غیر ضروری بود، اکسترا اینفورمیشنه، حتی میشه ریدیوسش کرد. broccoli is very nutritious. ولی اینو من نمیتونم حذفش بکنم، این قسمت رو بردارم کلشو. بگم the vegetables are often most nutritious، اون موقع میگه کدوم vegetables ها. بس that people live on eaten essentialش میکنه. هر موقع essential هست that میتونه با essential ها بیاد و نیاز به کاما نداره، ولی that رو با کاما هیچ وقت نمیتونی بیاری، بقیه رو میتونی با کاما بیاری و non essential تلقی خواهد شد.